Hi, Coultergeist here. I recently played the 2000s classic Deus Ex. Here's what factions do in a story. Factions are groups, and groups don't stick together without a shared goal. And when you have a group that is pursuing a shared goal, they are going to come into conflict with people who oppose that goal. Say you have a faction that wants to make a bridge to another dimension, and then say you have a faction that hates fun. Once those two groups learn of each other's existence, they are going to go nuclear. Having multiple factions that all have different goals makes for an interesting political landscape in your story, especially when those goals have just enough overlap for the different factions to butt heads. Wars are good in tabletop role-playing games. They damn well suck in real life. But in a TTRPG, a war offers dimensions to the worlds, and opportunities and dangers for the players therein. And they offer even more if those players are involved with or explicitly a part of the factions at play. A faction, once again, has a goal that will lead them into conflict with opposing factions, but that goal might also lead to conflict on the individual level. What if your players join a faction only to realize that the NPC they love is part of an enemy faction? Or what if your player's faction totally absolves an NPC that they hate of all the wrongdoing that caused them to hate that character in the first place? Pitting the personal feelings and goals of the player character against the goals and zeitgeist of the faction leads to a friction in their allegiances. One that's always a blast to play out. Players love that shit. Factions tend to have individuals that slot into different places in their organizational structure. For instance, a jeweler's guild will need miners to mine the jewels, couriers to deliver the jewels, jewelers to make the jewels into jewelry, and then merchants to sell the jewels. That's the basic pipeline, but that doesn't even cover overhead like the accountants and the guildmaster and the guards that they need to hire to protect their pipeline of jewels. Point is, if your players need jewels, they can go to the Jeweler's Guild. If they need help with a magic jewel, they can go to the Jeweler's Guild. If your players need to know anything jewel related, they can go to the Jeweler's Guild. Factions provide your world with experts that have their purpose written right there on the tin. When people become organized and push for their purposes together, they have a lot more forward momentum and are a lot harder to stop than any one individual would be alone. Ape together strong. So if a circle of druids decides that it would really help the balance of nature if a major city were to just disappear off the map, they'll be a lot harder to stop if they're aping out together. Deus Ex is a 2000s action role-playing video game set in the dystopian cyberpunk future of 2052, and the main theme sounds like this. At the start of the game, you're working for UNATCO, the United Nations Anti-Terrorist Coalition, which, as the manifold conspiracies of the game unfurl, you learn is just a pawn of Majestic 12, which is a splinter group off of the Illuminati. At first, you're just doing work for UNATCO, but then you end up defecting, and when you defect, allegiances shift. Certain characters defect with you, while certain characters stay, like Gunther, who you rescue in the first mission, but then eventually have to fight as a boss in the 10th mission.
Rest in peace, big guy.
While JC Denton, the guy you're playing as, has little to no compunction about doing a complete heel turn, you, as the player, might have some mixed feelings. Maybe you're like me and you liked Gunther. These feelings are a good indicator that you're engaging with the conflict, which means the conflict is doing its job of drawing you in. In search of allies, you end up as bedfellows with the Illuminati, which are useful to your purposes, but other allies that you've made along the way, like Tracer Tong, are distrustful of them, because they're, the Illuminati. This all culminates at the end of the game where you're faced with three possible options. Kill Bob Page, the leader of Majestic 12, and join the Illuminati as they reassume power over the world, or take your friend Tong's suggestion and destroy the World Wide Web and all global communication networks, plunging humanity into a new dark age, but destroying the corporate oligarchy in the process. Or cuck Bob Page out of the super AI he's trying to merge with by merging with it yourself, becoming a machine god of perfect reason to govern the Earth. These endings are wild, I know, but stick with me. I was reading up on the game, and there's actually was supposed to be a fourth ending that got cut for time, a bootlicker ending where you actually help Bob Page, staying loyal to Majestic 12. There are 4 factions at play. 3 of them want to control the world, and one of them wants to prevent the other 3 from controlling the world. The Illuminati wants business as usual, that business being them quietly controlling everything. Majestic 12 has new ideas, though, loudly controlling everything with the help of a super AI that Bob Page is going to merge with to become God. But Bob Page accidentally made a rift in his own faction. You see, Majestic 12 is loyal to him and the whole world domination thing. But Helios, the AI he created, just wants to govern the world efficiently, and thinks that Bob Page is in the way of that efficiency. So when Helios sees the opportunity to merge with JC Denton, the player character, instead of Bob Page, they choose Denton, because Bob's ego is going to get in the way of the whole perfect logic and reason thing. And then there's Tracer Tong, someone who is not loyal to any of these factions, and in fact wants to prevent one single faction from being in control of everything. So he decides that the best solution is to shoot everyone in the foot and catapult humanity back into the Stone Age. So to put it plainly, I brought up Deus Ex because I like it. It's a good game. If you get the chance, you should play it. But also because it's a good example. The entire game shows you the external conflict going on as Majestic 12 is shaking things up and the Illuminati is actively trying to counter them. There's internal conflict all over, and factions splitting into different factions when their goals no longer properly align. And all of the factions make solutions, problems, and problematic solutions. So now at this point you might be asking, that's cool, how do I make a faction in my TTRPG of choice? Your faction needs to want to do something, they need to have a goal, and do not make their goal something general like gain power. Every faction needs to gain power to achieve their goals. Everyone's going to be doing the gain power thing. Gaining power is not original. Give your faction something to do with the power that they accrue, like finding an ancient artifact, or defending against some external threat, or stopping another faction from achieving their goal. Assuming your faction isn't brand new, give them power. Give them something that they're good at in an area that they're invested in, and then give them allies based on that power that they have. A merchant faction is likely going to be a group with a lot of spare cash to throw around, and a lot of wealth in the form of land and material goods. So they're going to make allies with the people who are going to buy those material goods and need access to their wealth, like nobility and governments. A mercenary faction is going to boast a large arsenal of arms, armor, and most importantly, bodies. Now, their list of enemies is just as likely to be as long, if not longer, than their list of friends, but what allies they do have are likely going to be people who need access to battle-ready bodies, like warlords or rebellions. A mage faction is going to have knowledge that can't be found anywhere else, and is also going to have the ability to solve problems that other people can't. Meaning that they're probably going to make friends with knowledge seekers, archaeologists, scientists, theologians, people who want to know how the universe works, and who are also likely to encounter problems that can't be solved by mundane means. Regardless of how well you make your faction on the macro scale and fit it into the world, you're going to need friendly faces inside the faction to sell it to the players on the micro scale. Create some NPCs that have a reason to cross paths with the players, and then give them something that the players need that they can exchange with them at some point. Or just make them fun to talk to. They could have information, an item, or just some funny quirks that come across in conversation. Making 1, 2, or even 3 face NPCs for this group can make it feel more personable, and gives your players a tangible person to talk with when they need to interact with the faction. NPCs like this can also give the players a quick vibe check of what the faction values. Factions that are obsessed with honor are going to tend to have people inside it that are also obsessed with honor. Factions that only want to be associated with nobility are probably going to entice your highborn players to join them, and also turn their nose up at anyone who looks poor. And factions that aren't concerned with the rule of law are probably going to attract people who also disregard rules and laws. These are all traits and values that you can have your face NPCs be emblematic of, giving your player characters an idea of the atmosphere inside the faction. Factions can be whatever you need them to be, and fill any niche that you need to fill. There can be lone factions, like a magic school, or you can have tons of factions, like in Ravnica from Magic the Gathering. And the nice part is you can go to any level of detail that you want. Factions are usually full of sub-factions that are all vying for internal control, and those sub-factions are usually full of individuals vying for personal control. You can go as big or as small as you want, and make the faction that perfectly fits your story. Anywho, that's it. New video next week. Good night.